Third grade detectives, the clue of the left-handed envelope, Chapter 5. Noelle hurried down the sidewalk toward Mr. Merlin's classroom. When she reached the door, she stopped. "Please don't let Amber Lee have solved the mystery," she whispered. She held her breath. Then she slowly went inside. She looked over at Amber Lee. She let out her breath. She knew she could relax now. Amber Lee didn't look very happy. In fact, Amber Lee looked really mad. Noelle was sure that meant Amber Lee still didn't know who had sent her the letter. Suddenly, someone touched Noelle's shoulder. She whirled around. It was Leon. He was holding a glass jar. "Spit in this jar," Leon said. "What?" Noelle cried. "Spit in this jar," Leon repeated. "Why?" Noelle demanded. "I need some of your spit," Leon said. "No," Noelle said. She went on into the classroom. Leon followed her. "Spit in this jar, Noelle," Leon whispered. "I have to have some of your spit." Noelle took her seat next to Todd, and she ignored Leon. Finally, he walked away and took his seat. "What's going on?" Noelle whispered to Todd. "What did Leon want me to spit in that jar?" "Amber Lee is having some of her friends collect spit for her," Todd whispered. "She said that's what police do. She saw it on television last night." Noelle wondered if she should be collecting spit too. She decided she just couldn't go around asking people to spit into a glass jar. She looked around. Several people in the class were holding glass jars. Noelle could see the jars had something in the bottom of them. Spit. For a moment, she thought she was going to be sick. Then the bell rang, and Mr. Merlin started class. "Did anybody solve the mystery?" he asked. "I've almost solved it," Amber Lee said. "My friends and I are collecting spit from everyone." Mr. Merlin blinked. "Would you care to explain that, Amber Lee?" he said. Amber Lee stood up. "It's what police do," she said. "I saw it on television last night." "Well, it is true that police detectives often collect saliva samples from suspects," Mr. Merlin said, "but you have to be very careful about doing that because of diseases." "Ugh!" Amber Lee's friends cried. They all dropped their glass jars. The glass jars fell to the floor. Now there was spit and glass all over the place. Several people screamed. They put their feet up on their desk. Noelle saw Mr. Merlin take a deep breath and let it out. But he didn't get angry. Instead, he sent Leon to get the janitor. While the janitor was mopping up the floor, everyone copied the day's spelling words off the chalkboard. When the janitor finished, Mr. Merlin said, "Now then, back to our mystery. What are the rest of you doing?" Noelle raised her hand. "Yes," Mr. Merlin said. "Todd and I licked all of the envelopes at our house last night," she said. "We watched each other, but we didn't notice anything unusual." "Well, you and Todd are on the right track, Noelle," Mr. Merlin said. Noelle smiled. Amber Lee frowned. "I'll give you another clue," Mr. Merlin said. "To solve this mystery, you really do need to start with saliva, but it's the saliva on the flap of Amber Lee's envelope." Amber Lee gasped. "Let's do an experiment," Mr. Merlin said. "I have envelopes for everyone." He passed out the envelopes. "Hold them up in front of you," Mr. Merlin continued. All the kids in the class held up the envelopes in front of them. "On 3, I want everyone to lick the flaps," Mr. Merlin said. "Ready? 1, 2, 3. Noelle licked the flap of her envelope. So did the rest of the class. They made loud slurping noises. Everyone laughed. "Now then, class, I'm going to lick the flap of another envelope," Mr. Merlin said. Mr. Merlin turned his back to the class. "Watch me carefully," he said. He held up another envelope. He licked the flap. He turned back around to face the class. "Which side of the flap did I start on?" he asked. No one said anything. It's a trick question, Noelle thought. She hadn't paid attention to that. She closed her eyes. She tried to remember which side of the envelope flap Mr. Merlin had started on. She then tried to remember which side of the envelope flap she had started on. She thought she and Mr. Merlin had both started on the same side, the left. Noelle opened her eyes. "The left?" she shouted. "Correct," Mr. Merlin said. "Now I'm going to give you another clue," he added. "I am right-handed." That's not much of a clue, Noelle thought. Mr. Merlin looked at the class. "So what question would a good police detective ask next?" he said.